Hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking and how many are there now? Five berries present and accounted for. There is one positive from this whole situation. I'll tell you that much. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still a boatload of negatives here that could easily lead to the end of the universe. But there's at least one positive, and that is there are enough berries in a single location now to form the most epic rock band that has ever existed in the history of history. That's right, brick metal. Have you ever heard of it? Of course not, because it didn't exist until right at this moment. The name of the band is The Various Berries. You got to admit, that's a cool title. If you were driving through a town and you saw some random dive bar somewhere where the Various Berries were playing for one night only, you'd stop your car, you'd get out, and you'd go into that bar, right? Exactly, okay? We got Barry on vocals. We got Barry as the guitarist. We got Barry as the bassist. Barry as the drummer. And Barry as the trombone. You don't see a lot of trombones around in heavy metal. Maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not a huge music nut. But with brick metal, the trombone is absolutely necessary. What are we talking about today? Yasuie video. Okay, good. You know what? It's good. Yasuie, it's been a while. I've been meaning to talk about him. What's going on with him today? Okay, he is dead. He has been dead for a while now, as a matter of fact. Yeah, sorry, Yasu. I meant to do this video, like, last year, but, things happen. Okay, so, Yasuie Shimotsuki, the last daimyo of the land of Wano, who laid down his life so that Kinemon's master 15-degree chess game could play out exactly as he planned it. A plan so advanced that even Kinemon himself did not know what was really going on. But you know what? Yasu, at the time when his character was going through his little arc, like we get introduced to him, it kind of happens really fast from the time that he gets introduced to Zoro to him being this like goofy kind of character and cheering up all the people of Ebisu Town, leading up to him being captured, and then we find out that he used to be a Shimotsuki clan member that used to be the daimyo of the Hakumai region of Wano before Orochi and Kaido took over, then leading up to his execution. I think all of that stuff happens within the time span of like 30 chapters, which week to week it feels longer, but still it just seems like something that you have to kind of stop and look at in its full entirety, like reading it from the beginning to the very end. And you come up with some very interesting things involving Yasu's character and some of the stuff that he said, and it really just adds more to the lore of Wano. I would really love, like, you could honestly make an entire data book just on the Wano Kuni arc of One Piece alone, right? From all the time that Oda has spent planning this arc, all of his notes, all of the rough drafts and everything. By the way, we also got some new Vivara cards released. I will be doing a video on that, so thanks to Artor for the translations. But it was also revealed there that Yasuie was 71 years old upon his time of death when he was shot, and then also Otoko, who we were led to believe was Yasuie's daughter up until this point, is actually not his blood relative. She actually was adopted by Yasuie. She was like abandoned as an orphan in Ebisu Town, and Yasuie felt bad for her and took her in. So there was the relationship there, right? So at any rate, way back in the day, when Yasu was only 30 years old, that's right, he was 30 years old here. So that's the thing with the age of Yasu. I'm like, he's kind of like Raizo, where even when he was young, he kind of looks like really like an old man. So I wasn't really sure. You could say he's 30, 40, or 50 here, and I could kind of buy it. But no, this is when he was 30 years old right here. This is when the Mountain God incident happened. This is after Sukiyake kicked Oden out of the country, and Oden went to go live with Yasu for a little while in Hakumai before he began his grand tour of all of Wano, and he picked up all of the scabbards along the way, right? While he was there, it was mentioned that Oden was like, hey, everybody knows that I'm the failure of a son when it comes to the Kozuki clan. You know, my father, when he passes on, he's not going to make me the next shogun. Everybody knows that you, Yasuie, you are next in line to be the shogun of Wano. And Yasu responds to this by smacking Oden right over the head, and he hits him quite a few times, actually, and he's just like, you idiot, don't you understand? I'm not going to be the shogun, you're going to be the shogun, and you're going to like it, you know? So that's kind of cool right away, that Yasu's kind of personality, you know, he's not out to get power, he's not out to amass control over all of Wano. I guess if push came to shove and there was really no other option on the table, he would have taken up the position of shogun if, you know, Sukiyake really required it of him. But Yasu saw for what it was, that, you know, Sukiyake was just disowning you because of tough love, you know, he cares about you, he wants you to grow up, he wants you to become a noble samurai and a leader of the people of Wano. That's why he kicked you out of the flower capital, basically, kind of, so you would learn on your own, and then eventually, maybe if everything works out okay, you would become a samurai, and then you would become a true heir to the shogunate, right? So Yasu's like, don't worry about me becoming the Shogun. It's your responsibility. So go out there, leave my house, get the hell out of my house because you've been living here for a few weeks or whatever. Travel around Wano, learn what you can learn, and then hopefully come back a better person, right? And Yasu, he wasn't a super kind-hearted individual in the sense of like, coddling Oden or his scabbards or anything, but he certainly tried to teach them life lessons as blunt as he could. So there was the example when the scabbards, they knew Oden needed money, and so the scabbards, without any orders from Oden himself, snuck into Hakumai and tried to steal money from Yasu, and they were captured and they were detained, and then Yasuie comes out and all of his subordinates are like, Sir Yasuie, these scabbards of Oden, they snuck in the night and they took all the money, what should we do? And so Yasu kind of sat down and he's like, why did you guys steal all my money? Like, why did you rob all the coffers? And he's like Kinemon and Kanjuro and everybody there that's like, because Lord Oden needs it, and that's good enough of a reason. And so that was the point where Yasu kind of gave him like a life lesson talk as they're all tied up in his courtyard, and they're like, okay, listen guys, tell you what, I'll give you the money. He's like, yeah, well, screw you, Yasui. Wait, what? It's like Kinemon's like, well, you can go take it and shove it up. Oh, okay, why? And Yasu's like, I'll give you the money, but there's a condition, all right? Oden is going to rule this country someday. Like, that's, like, Yasu never doubted that. Yasuie, no matter all the stuff that Oden did, like, all the horrible things, like the harem wars that happened because of him, and, completely leveling the casino district, and literally causing a flood by redirecting a river, despite all that stuff that Oden did, Yasuie never lost faith that he's going to eventually one day become a samurai, and he's going to become the leader of this country. So he's like, that's your leader, and you follow him no matter what, right? He was kind of playing reverse psychology on the scabbards a little bit. It's like, you care for Oden, right? And he's like, well, yeah, of course, he's our boss, we all care about him. And he's like, all right, then this is what is in the best interest for everybody. Take this money and spend it on books. Spend it on books and educate yourselves. Educate yourselves to be noble samurai of the land of Wano. And you represent the land of Curry now, a region that used to be completely filled with, like, thugs and bandits, and Oden has now tamed that land and become the daimyo. It is your responsibility as the retainers of the daimyo of Curry to learn as much as you can, to culture yourselves, to mature, and become worthy of that title of samurai. All right? That is in the best interest for you, it's in the best interest for Oden, and it's in the best interest for all of Wano. And if you agree to that, I'll let you have this money. And so the scabbards agreed, and they took Yasu's money, and they did what they said, and they educated themselves, and then we see that as a little bit of a time skip a few years later. There's this awesome procession, and Oden's there as a daimyo of Curry, and everyone really respects him, and then all of the scabbards are walking down the street, all wearing the outfits and looking much more dignified because of Yasu's teachings, okay? Yasuie kind of assumed the role of, like, alright, Oden is kind of like a really rambunctious, like, older brother to all of the scabbards. I kind of have to be, like, the fatherly figure here and, tell them what they need to do, okay, to, like, guide them on the right path. And eventually they did get to that point, okay? And so Oden, he's the daimyo, everything seems to be going good, and then of course Whitebeard shows up and he leaves with Whitebeard, he meets Toki along the way, and then he meets Roger and then travels with Roger and everything, and all the while this is going on, Orochi is slithering his way through the bureaucracy of Wano to get higher and higher into the status and eventually become shogun himself. Now, Yasuie took in Orochi as a young child, when Orochi was being hunted by all of the people, to slay the Kurozumi clan, or the remnants of the Kurozumi clan. Yasu, I don't believe, ever found out his name right away, but he took him in nonetheless. And I think later on he found out that he was a Kurozumi and all that stuff. But Yasu didn't subscribe to that same kind of mentality of like, well, Orochi's grandfather did some nefarious things a few decades ago, therefore we need to hunt all of the Kurozumi clan into extinction. He didn't subscribe to that, so he took Orochi into his fold. However, Orochi, he was working with Higurashi and Semimon Ushimaru at this point, and so he was taking money from Yasu, taking money from Oden, and trying to build up as much as he could in order to overthrow the country altogether. And then you also had Higurarashi's Mane Mane no Mi abilities, and that just helped more and more. But it stands to wonder, if Yasu never, never accepted him into Hakumai, never accepted him into his estate, because the way that the Kurozumi clan was viewed at that point, it might have actually been really hard for, Orochi to get any work anywhere. Maybe another one of the daimyos, like the Fugetsu clan or the Uzuki clan or the Yamasuki clan, might have welcomed him in. Maybe not, but it was the Shimotsuki clan that extended that hand of Yasu's like, all right, come over here. And that's something that furthers, went with Otoko, because Otoko was adopted by Yasuie because, he felt bad for her. She was an orphan. So maybe it's the same thing with Yasu. He's like this, on the outside, he can be very blunt. He can be very, he can shout, and he can seem like he's very mean. But on the inside, he is a very gentle soul, okay? And so he took Orochi in, but even though that ended up backfiring for everybody at the end of the day. So, after the events of Oden's execution, in fact, during the events of Oden's execution, he actually went to Curry to make sure that Toki and everybody were protected for that one moment. Of course, everything went to hell, but at least he tried to make sure that they were safe as possible. He also heard the news about why Oden was doing the dance number for 5 years. Given Yasuie's personality, he probably didn't just assume that, he decided to be an idiot and dance in the street naked for 5 years. He probably figured there was something else going on, but he just didn't know. He learned about the truth shortly before the execution, that he was really doing the dance number to save all the people of Wano and everything like that. So we find out a little bit about this. We don't see a flashback, but it's just explained by Yasu while he's up on the cross about to be executed. We find out what happened after Oden died. So Oden dies, which means any hope for the Kozuki clan returning as the shogun is essentially gone, because at this point they assume that Hiyori and Momo are both dead. Toki is assumed to be dead. So they just think all of them are wiped out. The scabbards are wiped out as well. They can't find their bodies, but they just assume there's no way they could have survived that. Curry Castle got burned down, and Orochi and Kaido seemed to lord supreme over the land of Wano, right? And so the only real competition, the only real resistance they have left are the other daimyos of the regions, okay? So we had the Fugetsu, Uzuki, and Amasuki clans that ruled over 3 regions of Wano. We do not know exactly which regions they did rule over, but then we had the Shimotsuki clan that led Ringo, Shimotsuki Ushimaru, and then Shimotsuki Yasuie, who ruled over Ringo and Hakumai, respectively. So basically, Orochi approached all of the daimyos and said, okay, you can either bend the knee to me and Kaido. Probably not. He probably didn't include Kaido because he still wants to think of himself as awesome. Like, I am Lord Orochi! All of you daimyos will bow before me! And if not, I will rain down supreme justice and lightning upon you! Which is basically Kaido, but it's like, I will do it because I am Lord Orochi! And so the daimyos, with all sorts of, they weighed their options. They considered the possibility of a giant dragon god coming down and just blowing their entire nation to smithereens. And they decided, that's an interesting proposal there, Orochi. Yes. Screw you. And so they all refused. They all refused. You have to understand, now you might say, is like, well, is that the best option, considering that they literally do have a giant dragon god on their payroll that could, quite literally burn down their entire region if they wanted to. But these are the samurai of Wano. These are the daimyos of Wano. They have way too much pride, and they care too much about their homeland and the traditions of Wano. They would never bend the knee to Orochi, especially since after what happened with Oden, where even that was kind of the last straw there, where it was like, okay, we're going to give you a way to survive this if you could survive an hour in boiling oil, and he did, and they didn't let him survive anyway. So that was kind of the one moment where it's just like, we're not going to listen to you. Because, that's actually probably the smart move to okay, either we all fight against you and we all die trying and you take over the country anyway, or if we submit to you, you could always you could always flip it around and kill us anyway, right? Because you can't be trusted. He's Lord Orochi and Kaido. They can't be trusted, and Oden's execution proved that. So they all decided to work together, and we're going to fight. And I would love to see that scene right there. That's what I mean about an entire data book with nothing but Wano. You could have a little sketch in there of the daimyos all, because we haven't seen the sketches of all of them. We know Yasu, we had a little bit of Ushimaru, but I think even Ushimaru was in silhouette. Fugetsu, Uzuki, and Amasuki clan we know nothing about. So that would have been really cool to see all the daimyos together with their armies gathered at the borders of the flower capital and be like, we attack! And that's really sad too, considering that like that's just how much power that Kaido's army had. And Kaido himself, of course, you know, was a huge contribution to that, as well as King and Queen. Jack was also there as well, but he was a lot younger. Jack was only like 8 years old probably when this battle occurred. He might have still had a mammoth fruit though. So the situation is, with all of the armies together of all of the different regions of Wano organized under the daimyos, that still wasn't enough. I'm sure it was an epic battle. I'm sure there was a lot of the beast pirates they took down along the way, but even a massive army couldn't do anything against Kaido. And so it's implied all of the other daimyos died. We know Ushimaru died, and we don't know about the other three, but we assume they died as well, and that leaves just Yasuie. Now, it was assumed Yasu died as well, so maybe some of the other daimyos are alive as well. Who knows? Maybe one of them will pop up, like Daimyo Fugetsu will pop out of the ground and be like, hey, by the way, I was alive the whole time. I was hiding in this cave for the last 20 years or whatever. But no, I'm assuming they're all dead. Yasu managed to survive. It was never explained how, although he did say it was not of my own choice, but I did survive. So in that particular instance, I think maybe Yasuie had maybe one of his retainers or one of his second in command or something like that, and he was like, Lord Yasu, you have to survive no matter the cost. Even if it means living in Orochi's Wano, even if it means living in this hell, you have to live. You have to be the guiding light, because if one day Kaido and Orochi are thrown from the throne, that's another interesting name for maybe a heavy metal band or something, thrown from the throne. But if that day ever comes, there has to be somebody to become the next shogun. Okay, and aside from Toki's prophecy, which a lot of people were kind of not really sure about that, the Kozuki clan's wiped out. So I'm sure there was some retainer of Yasu that managed to, like, you know, hide him away, or maybe they knocked him out. Like, I'm sorry, Lord Daimyo Yasuie, but you must live! Bam! Knocked him out and carried him somewhere safe. And then he woke up later and he's like, damn it, they all died for me! Why am I still alive? I'm sure he gripped with that for a while, you know? He's like, how come I'm the only one that survived? All the other daimyos died, the entire army got wiped out. It didn't do anything, and the Kozuki clan is gone, and Orochi and Kaido still rule everything. So I'm sure he was kind of depressed for a while there. He was kind of really broken down, very similar to Denjiro in that respect. But eventually he decided what he had to do. And keep in mind, this is already when he was in his 50s, you know, when the whole, battle took place. And after the battle, after he survived, he decided, you know, I can't do much by myself. I certainly don't have an army at my back anymore. Yasu, it was stated directly in the Vivre card, he has no devil fruit abilities, not even the smiles. He really didn't have anything. So he's like, okay, what's the one thing I can do though? And if I reveal who I am, if I go around telling people that I'm Shimotsuki Yasuie, you know, Orochi's gonna find out about that and want to execute me anyway. So it's like he changed his name to Tono Yasu, or just Yasu for short, which is a much more common name. And he decided, all right, the one thing I can do is I can try to uplift the spirits of the people that are under Orochi's thumb. That is the best I could possibly do just by myself, okay? Because Wano was becoming a living hell, and, you know, I'm just an old man at this point, but that's one thing I can do. So Yasu went to Ebisu Town, which is the leftover village outside of the flower capital, where everybody that gets kicked out of the flower capital goes to live. This was also the place where Orochi took the big giant truck of all of the defective smiles, the smiles that didn't give them powers, and he gave them to all the townspeople, and they all consumed them, resulting in failed smile users, so all they can do is laugh, and they still can't swim, but they can't express any emotion other than laughter or joy. You know, they can't feel sad truly because of that effect of the fruit. Yasu apparently did not eat any though because of that, but he was a laughing and smiling man regardless, just to cheer up everybody else, taking on the job title of Taiko Mochi. And Taiko Mochi in Japan were male geishas. Now it's important to keep in mind what the job of a geisha was during the era of, like, you know, like the Sengoku period into the Edo period of Japan. Geishas were referred to as the people of the arts, okay? Basically, think of it this way. This is an era where, of course, like, television and radio didn't exactly exist, so how are you going to pass the time if you're a daimyo, or if you're a lord, or somebody of high standing in the country of Japan way back in, like, the Sengoku period, or the Edo period, right? You would hire a geisha. A geisha's job was, as you saw with Robin, to entertain in forms of dance, also through music, but also just conversation, you know, just the idea to have someone come come and sit down and just speak with and talk to, or perhaps tell a story or something like that, sort of like a bard in that sense. That was really the role of geisha, or to paint, you know, something like that, to entertain. That was the form of arts and entertainment that existed at that time period. And male geishas were actually, it depends on the era, but there was a point in Japanese history where male geishas were much more abundant than female geishas. And so that's what Tono Yasu kind of embodied in that one particular instance. At one point, they were also considered jesters, you know, like you would think in the traditional sense of like a court jester is just there to like act like a fool, like the court fool, to dance and be silly and goofy. There was a point in history where I think they were more for that, but I think at the very beginning, their role really was more of like companionship, and sometimes even be like the right hand to their lord or the daimyo or whoever happened to be leading them at the time. And so the male geisha's role, the taiko mochis, change throughout the eras of Japan, but that is what Yasu's job was, okay? And he fulfilled that. He was like, I'm gonna be an entertainer to kind of keep everybody's spirits up. So it's like, yeah, everybody, we're living in Ebisu Town. We don't have any clean water, and we may not have a lot of fresh food, but we have each other, and we have laughter, so that's something, right? Right, berries? Yeah, it's kind of sad when you think about it, and I think Zoro probably thought the same thing when, you know, Yasu took him into town. You see the old lady, and you know, there's Toko there as well, and they're all laughing and having a good time, even though they live in complete poverty, and they're under the control of Orochi and Kaido, because they literally can't help it. And so Yasu's there, and he does as best as he can to help out everybody, to help out, like, the elderly of the town, even though he's an old man himself. You know, he struggles through it, but he perseveres. And the fact that he did not have a smile is extremely relevant, because he had to, like, in probably a lot of instances, he had to force that. He had to force the laughter and the smiles to cheer everybody up, because, you know, it didn't come second nature to him because of the smiles, and so he had to really struggle with that, I'm sure. There were some nights where he didn't really feel like smiling too much, but he had to keep it up, right? And so he did. Now, the most important thing, of course, he did was at his execution, okay? So, like I said, for 20 years here, he was thinking of, like, ways that he could free Wano from Orochi, and he couldn't really think of anything other than just trying to cheer up the people, get their spirits high. But then, boom, right at the 20-year mark, all of a sudden the scabbards return. All of a sudden the Straw Hats and other pirates are coming in from outside of Wano, and I think I think Yasuie at this one point realized, okay, this is the time. This is the time to shine, okay? Even if it means giving up my life, which it did ultimately result in, I have to do what I have to do, okay? And so the issue was that there was a spy working with the scabbards. Of course, we know that to be Kanjuro right now. And he was feeding information to Orochi, and so they found out about the plan. They found out about the plan and what the mark of the crescent moon on everybody's ankles means. Orochi's paranoid, so he rounds everybody up that has that tattoo, throws them in Rasetsu Town, in the prison gallery and all that stuff. And then Yasuie sees this, and he's like, okay, this isn't good, because if things continue the way they are, the plan is foiled, and they won't have enough of the manpower to fight back against Kaido. So that's what I can do. I will give up my life if it means giving them just a little bit of help. So Yasu gets captured, gets thrown into jail as well. While he's in the prison gallery with all of the other members of the rebellion, he takes out the modified image of the two swans with the lines through it and the snake. Not swans, sorry, cranes. They were the cranes on the piece of paper because of the Kozuki clan, right? So he hands that out to everybody in the prison gallery and like, okay, here's the modified plan, and then he reveals who he truly is. You know, I am Shimotsuki Yasuie, the last daimyo of the Hakumai region. And so that gets the attention of Orochi and Kaido, and Orochi in particular is like, oh, no, he needs to be executed as quickly as possible. So they bring him up on the cross in front of the entire flower capital, and they beat him senseless, and he's got a black eye, and he's up there, and he's all wounded and bloody, and everybody from the leftover town, from Ebisu Town, breaks into the flower capital trying to save him, because he means that much to them. Somebody that gave up himself so much, like they refer to him as like the Buddha of Ebisu, right? And so they all charge into the flower capital like, Lord Yasu, you're still alive, you're the one that saved us all these years. Without you, we couldn't possibly make it till tomorrow. And so Zoro's there, Hiyori's there, Ashura Doji's there. This was the point that resulted in Ashura Doji joining up with the scabbards, witnessing Yasu's death. And Yasu is kind of like, this is perfect. I have everybody where I need them to be. They even gave him the ability to speak, I think, like his last words through a loudspeaker, because his execution was being broadcast all over Wano and at the prison and at Onigashima and everywhere. So Yasu's like, this is perfect. I'm going to die today. I'm going to be riddled full of bullets, but they gave me a platform. They gave me a way to address the entire nation at once. And Yasu knows that there's plenty of people all over the country that hate Orochi, that don't want him to be the ruler, and they're really afraid of him, and they're afraid to speak up because of what Orochi and Kaido would do. So he's like up there, and he's like talking about how, oh, you don't understand that whole, the plan, the rebellion, the crescent moon tattoo, that was all a gag, that was all a joke. But look at what Orochi did. He was so paranoid, he was so afraid of his own shadow that he rounded everybody up with that tattoo and threw them in jail. They're completely innocent. They had nothing to do with anything. And so all of the prison guards are like, oh boy, because they're looking behind them, like, wow, we rounded up a lot of people with that tattoo. And so they start, thinking down of Orochi. They kind of already did, behind closed doors, but now they're starting to be like, man, Orochi really is paranoid. I can't believe we, arrested, half of the town just because he said so on completely baseless claims. And so that's what, Yasuie is saying, because everyone kind of buys what his word is because he used to be the daimyo, and also he's about to die, so no use in lying now, I guess, is the perspective. But he's also up there, and he's just kind of, taking it all in for one last time. He's looking at the entire country of Wano. He's looking at the flower capital as, the cherry blossoms blow by, and he's like, such a lovely land the flower capital is, right? It's the only place in the country that's left. Orochi, you've completely ruined this once amazing country, this land, with your greed and your evil. And so the last words out of his mouth are, everybody, this is the last line. This is the last hurrah for the Daimyo of Hakumai. Everybody... he did everything he was meant to do. He passed the new message and what the new plan was going to be, and he accepted the fact that resulted in his death. He apologizes to Otoko. Otoko's there crying, because that's basically her father, adopted father, but still her father's like, Dad, no! And he's like, you will carry on the legacy. And Yasu died with a smile on his face, I think, knowing that they were going to succeed in the end of the day. And he's kind of like, all right, after I die and I pass on and I go to meet Oden and everybody in the afterlife, eventually someday, long from now, I hope to meet all of you again in that world, and you can tell me everything that happened. So he was talking to the Kozukis, Momo and the Scabbards, and he's like, eventually when you win and you die, when it comes your time to pass on to the next life, Kinemon, Ashura, everybody can come into the afterlife and speak to me about how you all won. And so Yasue dies with a smile on his face. Now, that's also, of course, something very indicative of the will of D. Now, the thing is, and this is a theory I've had for a while, the will of D isn't necessarily carried on by just the initial. I mean, certainly the initial exists, and it's very important as, symbolism and everything, but I think it's possible for someone to bear the will of D without literally having the D in their name. And when it comes to Wano, it makes sense because the country of Wano is very traditional, so their naming scheme might be very different. So they might not have the concept of a middle name or a middle initial in Wano. You know what I mean? So with that being said, I think Kozuki Oden definitely embodied the will of D, even though his name was not Oden D. Kozuki, because they just didn't have that custom in their country. They just kept, Kozuki Oden, but he still had the will of D. And then Yasu died with a smile on his face. I could see Yasu also bearing the will of D, even though he didn't literally have it in his name, okay? I think that would make sense considering what they both stood for, what they both represented. They both yearned for freedom in different ways. I think Yasu yearned for Oden to become the daimyo and then eventually the shogun because he believed in him and everything. That was the best course for Wano and everything like that. Oden, of course, wanted to go out to sea and then see the bigger world and everything, but eventually came back to Wano to save it anyway. He unfortunately couldn't succeed at that point, but it was through Oden and through Yasu's efforts that they set the groundwork for what was going to come. And even though everyone, because Kinemon misinterpreted the plan, well, that was a blessing. That helped out, That would have really sucked if Yasu died for nothing, but he didn't. He didn't. And man, I would love the last thing Orochi thinks about. Picture this. Picture when Orochi finally does die, which will happen. He might have to get his heads cut off a few more dozen times, but it will eventually happen. Also, at that point, keep in mind, Zoro is taking out a bounty on freaking Orochi's head right there. After he witnessed how Yasu died and after Hiyori told him all about the smiles and what Orochi did and how Yasu had to die there riddled with bullets being fired by Orochi, Zoro was like, I'm gonna be the one to kill him. And Hiyori's like, yeah, but I want to be the one to kill him. He's like, yeah, but I want to kill him too. But thankfully for the power of his devil fruit, apparently that's all conceivable. Like, all of them can get a chance to, right? But I would love that last scene, the last thing Orochi sees, like he's down to his last head or something, Zoro takes out Enma and just whoosh! And then swishes and then cuts off freaking Orochi's head. And as his head, he realizes this is it. He has no other extra lives. His head's flying through the air, boom, hits the ground, in that briefest of moments, in like the 3 seconds that he has left before he loses consciousness and dies, after his head's been decapitated, he sees Yasuie's smiling face, just like, ha 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 ha, and Orochi's like, no! And then he dies. There we go. Then he's dead. There you go. For good. That would be beautiful, would it not be? Of course it would. Alright. Well, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video on the great Daimyo Yasuie. Thanks for watching. And, also, the One Piece World Popularity Poll, I should mention that here at the end. The final top 10 came down, and, you know, who's that right there, everybody? Oh, look at that. Look at, number 8 on that poll. I wonder who that is right after, Sabo and Ace. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's just crazy how you look at the top 10 favorite One Piece characters in the entire world, and of course you got Luffy there, you got Zoro, I mean those are a given. Nami made number 3, oh that's splendid. Robin's in there, absolutely, of course. Upset that Frankie was the lowest ranked Straw Hat again. There was another poll where that happened, but whatever, whatever. I'm just saying, there's a lot of characters here that are Straw Hats, or are, you know, like Ace was Luffy's brother, and, you know, Sabo is also Luffy's brother, and, you know, I'm just saying, like, if Carrot were to become a Straw Hat, I mean, that's just, yeah, I mean, it seems like people are on my side with that one. I'm just saying. Have a good one, everybody.